Hey everyone, this is Brad from the Dark Sliders podcast with a review of Madden NFL 2016. This is going to be a little bit different than our normal podcast. We did not do a full episode this week. Doug's kind of been gone, busy, so he hasn't been around to do one. And with Madden, he hates sports games anyway, so I don't think he would have had anything good to add anyway. But I love Madden, and I want to do a review of it just because I feel like there's not enough reviews of this game from people who really, really like Madden. A lot of reviews, normally it just sounds like the people are forced to play this for their job. But this is a game that I love, and this is a game that I've loved for a long time. I buy it every year. I'm one of those people, even though it's quote unquote just a roster update. But I love it. And this one I think might be one of the better ones that have been put out in recent memory. So let's get into this. So this year, they added a few new gameplay mechanics. A lot of times these just feel like they're kind of tacked on. You see them once and then you don't really bother too much with them. But this year I really like the ones that they added, and I think they definitely changed the way that you play this game. So to start out, most of this is in the passing game. So when you get the ball now as the quarterback, instead of just picking a receiver, pushing the button, and hoping they catch it, they've added a few new things in to kind of ensure that the ball goes where you want it to go, gets there how you want it to get there, and the receiver plays it the way you're thinking. So when you go to throw the ball, you have options now as to how you throw it. And there's normally been like a lob and a bullet, and they've changed kind of the velocity which you throw it. So that's all back. And they've added in, you can throw it high, you can throw it low. So for example, when you're playing as the Detroit Lions, which is who I played with 90% of the time, it's my favorite team. If you go to throw the ball on a deep route to Calvin Johnson, you can lob it up, throw it so it's higher so he has to jump up and get it, which just really changes your thought process as you're throwing this, because now you have more options as to how you're going to set this up. With that as well, not only does the quarterback options change, but before you had really no control over your receiver. Now what you can do is after you throw it, you have three options for how the receiver is going to try and make the catch before the ball gets there. So you can either have them do a possession catch, an aggressive catch, or a rack or run after the catch. So all of these definitely change the way that your receiver catches the ball. So for example, if you pick your possession catch, that's, Wes Welker, just grab the ball and fall down right away. It basically, the way it works is that makes it so that the receiver focuses on concentrating on catching the ball, so it's harder for it to get knocked out, it's harder for them to drop it, but they're not going to get any yards past that point, because 90% of the time if you pick a possession catch, they're going to grab it and fall down. The aggressive catch is that deep ball, we're just going to play a jump ball in the end zone. With that is where you see the spectacular catch skill come into play. So players with really good spectacular catch really have an advantage with that aggressive catch, because that's the jumping up, the one-handed catch above everybody else, which if you're throwing to a good receiver who has that skill, it works really, really well. If you're throwing to somebody who doesn't, it doesn't help at all, and often they just end up dropping it because it does increase your chances of the receiver not catching it, which is kind of a cool thing to think about as you're throwing it. And then the run after catch is just, it puts your receiver in a position where they're catching the ball in front of them, and they're going to just keep running without slowing down at all to catch the ball. So it really changes how you're thinking about things when you're throwing the ball, which I think is really cool and adds just another layer of depth to that. With that as well, the defense kind of is a counter to that. So now on defense, instead of just having the swap ball or the catch ball option, you have two ways that your corner is going to play it. They're either going to play the ball or they're going to play the receiver. So they can either go, and if you pick play ball, they're going to go up, they're going to try and make the interception. They're going to try and knock the ball down. If you pick play receiver, they're just going to go and try and lay the hit and just try and get the receiver down right away. So if it's 3rd and 10, the receiver catches the ball a yard short, you're going to want to play the receiver to tackle him there instead of playing the ball and try and make that big play, so that you know that, okay, now it's going to be 4th and 2 and they're going to punt anyway. So it definitely changes up the way that you play in a really good way that makes it seem much deeper than what it's been before. Of course, the game looks great. It's all new graphics engine, I think. It looks like it is. The player models are really well done. It looks really well. The only real negative things about the game itself, if you've played Madden before, you know that Madden has long load times getting into games. These are still there. It takes a while to get your game going. I'll turn the game on, go run to the fridge, grab something to drink, come back, and okay, now the game's loaded up, we're ready to go. The commentators are also, it's Jim Nantz and Phil Simms this year. I don't like either of those guys on normal football games, so hearing them over and over again gets really old. Neither one of them are commentators that I particularly care for, so that got a little old for me. If you like Jim Nantz and Phil Simms, you might have a little bit of a different opinion on that. Outside of the gameplay, there's 4 major modes this year. There's Skills Trainer, Franchise, Madden Ultimate Team, and the new one, which is Draft Champions. Draft Champions is one of the coolest, most addicting modes I've ever seen in a sports game. This is basically Madden's attempt to make fantasy football in Madden. So if you've done fantasy drafts before, getting into franchise mode and things like that, where you have to draft your entire team, this streamlines the process and makes it super quick. So the way this works is you go into Draft Champions and you do a fantasy draft. But what it does is you start with a coach and you start with a style. So you might pick a coach who has a long pass, run stopping style. So that way you know what type of playbook you're going to get. Then you get into drafting players. And what it does is it's 15 rounds, 3 players each round. And the 3 players aren't from the same position. So but they'll all be fairly similar ability levels. So you might get Russell Wilson, Frank Gore, and Golden Tate. All kind of mid 80s rankings, and you have to pick between those 3. And then that's going to be the player that you get in your team. You're going to pick 15 players. What the game does is the game fills out the rest of your roster, the other 50, or 53 minus 15, 38, fills out the other 38 players with those kind of mid-range, low 70s, mid 70s players so that you do have a full team to play with. After your draft, you play 3 games. If you win all 3 games, you win a Madden Ultimate Team pack bonus thing. But if you lose, your game's over. As soon as you lose a game, it just boots you right out. You have to redraft a new team, which is kind of cool because it just makes it feel like, okay, I've got 3 games. You play your 3 games, you win, awesome, I get a new team. You lose, if you didn't like the team, it works out pretty well because it is fairly random how it throws players at you. I did end up with a couple teams that I particularly didn't like, just the players that I got offered. But it really changed up the way that you're thinking about the game and the way you're thinking about players, and it's super quick. The draft itself takes maybe 3 minutes, and it works really, really well, and I think it's one of the coolest modes they've put in a long, long time. And it really does give you that feeling of fantasy football. Of course, there's a skills trainer. This is the tutorial mode. It's got some different mini games and stuff. A couple of them are kind of cool, but it's the tutorial. It's mini games. If you don't know how to play Madden, I think it's a great tool to kind of learn it, but there's nothing super crazy there. Franchise is, the basics are still the same. They did add in this year much more to player experience and player progression. So before it was kind of your player progressed every now and then they made it so, okay, now you can manually progress them after every game and you can put the skills where you want them to. This year they really got into kind of the RPG thinking with this. Every player has different quests, quote unquote, is what they're called, that they're on, or goals. Now these are single game, season, career, and drive goals. Now the way these work is a single game, let's take Calvin Johnson. So Calvin Johnson, his single game quest or goal might be to get 100 yards. You get the 100 yards, you get a confidence boost, and you get an XP boost. So XP is kind of your long range permanent, whereas confidence is just a instant bonus. So you get your 100 yards, he gets an instant bonus for the rest of that game and the next couple games. Weekly goal, just for that game, is the 100 yards. His season goal might be to get 1,500 yards, and his career goal is, of course, a lot. And these are ability specific, which I thought was really cool. So not every receiver has the same goals as Calvin Johnson. So playing as the Lions, Calvin Johnson, his goal for the game might be to get 100 yards and 5 catches. Golden Tate, his goal might be to get 3 catches and a touchdown. Corey Fuller, who's the Lions' number 3, number 4 receiver, his goal is going to be to get 2 catches or get 30 yards. So depending on how these players are set up on your roster determines their goals, which is really cool. And you can, as you go through the game, it actually gives you like heads up on kind of a bottom news ticker after every play. It'll say goals. Calvin Johnson, 10 yards out of 100. And then the next play it'll say, okay, Calvin Johnson now is at 25 yards out of 100 as you go through the game. It also, every play you make, even if it doesn't contribute to a goal, will put up the amount of XP that player got. So if you go and you make a tackle after the play's over, it'll right above the linebacker's head, it'll say +6 XP every time you make a tackle. So there's lots of ways to really track this, and it really gives you an idea of, okay, what do I need to do to really make sure I'm gaining experience with my players, I'm able to progress my players the way I want to. If you don't want to progress your fourth receiver, don't throw to him. He's never going to get any XP. If you want to make sure that Calvin Johnson gets a ton of XP, look at his goals and say, okay, he needs to get 100 yards this game. Well, he's at 80 yards. If I just keep throwing to him, I'm going to hit the 100. I'm going to get that boost. So it really does do a good job of making it so that you have an idea of what your players are doing and how to get them to become better. Madden Ultimate Team's last mode, I don't really care for Ultimate Team. I never have. It's microtransaction heavy like it always is. I tend to think that skews it a lot because if you put money in, your team is instantly good and it completely kills the idea of the mode. I like it in principle, but I just think the microtransaction kills it, especially when you get into online. But basically, you get your pack, you have your team of crappy players. As you go, you get coins to buy new packs, get better players, until you get ultimately, the best players in the NFL now, and of course they have the legend cards in there as well. But it's just something I've never really been able to get into. It seemed about the same. I didn't put a lot of time into it, but it seems about the same that it's been the past few years. Overall, this Madden is fantastic. If you have any interest in Madden at all, if you've played any of them, this is one of the better ones. The gameplay changes actually seem like they fit. The Draft Champions mode alone is something to give a shot if you're into football or fantasy football at all. It's really, really cool, and it really makes you think about the players. I think it's awesome, and they've really made franchise mode a little bit deeper than it has been in the past. It's not going to change your mind. You don't like Madden, you're not going to like this game. You like Madden, highly recommend it. If you're one of the people that just buys the Goodyear every few years, this is one to get. We will be back next week with a full episode. Doug will be back. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at darksliders_pod. Subscribe to us here on YouTube or SoundCloud as well. Thanks for listening.